A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support.
It was a balmy Wednesday evening when I found myself staring into my half-empty glass of cheap wine, the dim light of the bar casting flickering shadows across the rippling surface. The muffled laughter and chatter around me felt distant, like I was observing life through a foggy window. It was the kind of place where secrets were whispered, and hearts were unknowingly shattered, and I was about to turn that heartbreak into something far more sinister. I had been nursing my own wounds for the past 4 months since he, Liam, walked out of my life with a smirk and a trail of lies. The memory still stung like the cheap wine burning my throat. He had been my whole world, the charming smile that could light up a room and the tender touch that made me forget all my worries. But all of that faded the moment I discovered messages on his phone, revealing a betrayal I never saw coming. For months, he had been seeing someone else, a girl he claimed was just a friend while I had believed in our fairy tale. And just like that, our love story crumbled. I felt like a ghost in my own life, wandering through familiar spaces but feeling utterly lost. My friends tried to console me, offering sympathy and the usual platitudes. But I wasn't looking for sympathy, I wanted justice. I wanted him to feel the sting of betrayal, to understand the devastation he'd inflicted on me. Then, there was Sarah. She was stunning, confident, playful, and unapologetically herself. We met at a mutual friend's party, where she effortlessly drew people in with her laughter. But what caught my eye was how she seemed to thrive on the attention of both men and women. The way she embraced her bisexuality was as refreshing as a summer breeze, and in that moment, a dark plan began to hatch in my mind. As I sat in that bar, swirling the remnants of my drink, the air crackling with a mixture of anticipation and dread, I found myself concocting a web of deception. I wasn't just going to sit back and let Liam have his happily ever after with his new girlfriend. I could almost taste the sweet satisfaction of revenge, chilling and exhilarating all at once. I needed to lure him into a situation that would unravel everything he thought he had built. But what I was planning was dangerous, both to him and to my own heart. The line between revenge and self-destruction was blurred, and I could feel the weight of my choices settling heavily on my shoulders. I had no idea how far I was willing to go, but deep down, I knew that this was just the beginning. The pieces were falling into place, and soon enough, I would turn the tables in a way he could never have imagined. Little did I know, revenge is a double-edged sword. And as I sat there, plotting my next move, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that the aftermath might be more explosive than I had ever anticipated. As the night wore on and the bar began to empty, I replayed the moment I discovered Liam's betrayal over and over in my mind. The cold, hard reality of it still felt surreal. I had been slumped on our couch, scrolling aimlessly through social media when a notification from his phone lit up the darkened room, an innocuous ding that shattered my world. It was a message from her, a girl I didn't even know existed. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you, babe," red heart emoji. That single line pierced through the cozy cocoon of our life together. I remember standing frozen, my heart racing as confusion morphed into disbelief. Liam had come home just minutes later, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I had forced a smile, pretending nothing was wrong while my mind spiraled deeper into suspicion. Each tick of the clock felt like a ticking time bomb, counting down to a confrontation I dreaded yet craved. When I finally confronted him, I sought an explanation, but all I got were half-hearted excuses wrapped in lies. "She's just a friend, babe. You know how I am with my friends." The warmth of his words felt like ice on my skin. I wanted to believe him, I had invested so much of myself into this relationship. The moments we shared played in my mind like a reel of a movie I thought would never end, until that moment shattered it all. I watched as he continued to weave these elaborate stories, his charming smile faltering under the weight of my disbelief. How could he look me in the eyes, the same eyes that once promised me the world, and lie so easily? My stomach churned with a mix of anger and sorrow, and I could feel the tears pricking at my eyelids as I fought to maintain my composure. And when the truth came crashing down, when I found out she wasn't just a friend but someone he had been seeing for months, the betrayal felt like a sucker punch to my gut. I had never felt so small and insignificant in my life. Each revelation pulled me deeper into a pit of despair, transforming me from a hopeful romantic to a woman scorned. The laughter we had shared, the plans we had made, they all morphed into reminders of the lies that had wrapped around our love like vines, choking its life out. As days turned into weeks, that initial pain began to crystallize into something else, an insatiable desire for revenge. I began replaying our time together, assessing every moment I thought was genuine, every laugh shared that now felt like a cruel joke. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been a mere character in his story, one that he could toss aside when he found a new muse. And then Sarah entered my life like a ray of sunshine cutting through the storm clouds of my heartbreak. She was everything Liam wasn't: vibrant, open, and unapologetically herself. I couldn't help but admire her confidence, the way she navigated life on her own terms. Our friendship blossomed quickly. I confided in her about my heartbreak, and she listened with genuine empathy, reminding me that I was more than the heartbreak that threatened to consume me. But soon, something darker began to take root within me. I saw Sarah's charm and beauty as a weapon, a tool I could wield to bring down the very foundation of Liam's new relationship. I fucking hated him for what he had done to me, and yet, there was a twisted thrill in imagining how effortlessly he'd fall for someone like Sarah. He wouldn't suspect a thing. The more I thought about it, the more it consumed me. Every interaction with Sarah became a rehearsal for the part I had decided to play in this sickening drama. I began to mastermind a plan that would ensnare Liam in a web of his own making. I convinced Sarah to flirt with him when I knew they'd be at the same party, just a few casual texts exchanged between us. I hid my intentions behind laughter and friendship, but the truth was that each moment of their budding connection felt like a small victory. But the thrill of the chase soon soured. I felt a strange heaviness in my chest, an uneasy tension that loomed over me like a thunderstorm waiting to break. The closer I got to executing my plan, the more I began to lose sight of myself. The girl who was once overflowing with optimism felt like a distant memory, replaced by a vengeful specter, prowling in the shadows of my mind. My friends started to notice my change. They'd ask if I was okay, if I needed to talk, but I brushed them aside. I couldn't let anyone in. I couldn't risk them seeing the darkness consuming me. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between two mutual friends at a cafe. They were discussing Liam's new girlfriend and laughing about how perfect they seemed together. Each word felt like a dagger to my heart. I wanted to scream that he didn't deserve happiness, that he was nothing but a fraud. But instead, I sat there in silence, stirring my cold coffee, feeling smaller and more invisible with every passing moment. With each laugh that erupted from their table, I felt the walls I had built around my heart close in tighter, suffocating me. This was when isolation became my only companion. The few hours I spent with Sarah turned into days where I meticulously planned every interaction with Liam, yet the guilt gnawed at my insides like a feral animal. I had once dreamed of happiness for myself, and yet here I was, seeking solace in the misfortune of others. When I lay awake at night, the cruelty of my thoughts echoed in the dark corners of my mind. I was spiraling, no longer able to distinguish between right and wrong. I had sought revenge as a means of healing, but instead, I was deepening my wounds. And then came the moment that shook me to my core. One night, I walked into a bar, my bar, where I had once felt comfortable and carefree. I was supposed to meet Sarah, but as I crossed the threshold, I froze. There, in the dim light, stood Liam, laughing with friends, his new girlfriend nestled comfortably by his side, her arms draped around his shoulders. The air in the room thickened, and my heart raced with anger and humiliation. I felt the walls close in, the laughter ringing hollow as it echoed in my ears. Desperately, I forced myself to look away, but it was too late. The sight of him, his carefree laughter, the way he brushed his fingers against her cheek, made my insides churn. I felt sick as rage boiled beneath the surface, a feral instinct barely contained. As Sarah entered moments later, I flew into a nervous panic, wanting to pull her aside and relay my plan, desperate for her participation in my revenge. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern lining her face as she noticed my distress. I plastered on a smile, fighting against the tightness in my chest. "Just feeling a bit under the weather," I lied, my voice cracking slightly. But the truth was, I was unraveling. I had lost perspective on what this revenge meant, and I could feel the weight of my actions hanging heavily over my conscience. As I tried to engage in casual conversation with Sarah, my thoughts kept drifting back to Liam. The laughter, the tenderness he displayed towards her, my heart sank under the reality that he was truly moving on, while I was still tethered to the ghost of our shattered relationship. Then, in that moment of self-imposed isolation, I caught a glimpse of his eyes. They were bright, alive, filled with a warmth I had once basked in and now envied from the shadows. A stark realization hit me: I was willing to jeopardize not only my happiness but also the innocent lives caught in my web of revenge. I was transforming into everything I had despised about Liam, a puppet master, manipulating feelings like they were mere toys. I turned to Sarah, forcing a laugh, but it felt hollow against the backdrop of my shattered peace. "Let's grab a drink," I suggested, eager to drown the guilt in another cheap glass of wine. But as I sipped, my heart raced, my fingers twitching with pent-up rage. I wanted to scream at Liam, confront him with the truth of his betrayal, but the weight of my calculated malice kept me silent. Then came the moment that shattered the fog of vengeance and plunged me into stark clarity. In the chaotic joy surrounding me, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, Sarah pulled me aside under the soft glow of the fairy lights strung across the ceiling. "You haven't been yourself lately," she said gently, her eyes searching mine. "Talk to me. What's really going on?" At that moment, it felt as though the walls of my carefully constructed facade crumbled. I stood there, staring into her genuine concern, and a wave of remorse washed over me. How could I keep dragging Sarah into this twisted game? How could I continue using someone who had only shown me kindness and support? That's when the final straw snapped. I caught Liam's laughter again, this time a cold realization settling in my gut like ice. It wasn't just a matter of revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming myself, taking back my narrative rather than letting Liam dictate the terms of my existence. His presence, the way it evoked so much pain, reminded me that my happiness shouldn't be contingent on his suffering. I could let go of the vengeance, the toxic need to see him hurt, and instead, I could focus on healing, truly healing, for myself. In that moment, surrounded by the clamor of the bar and the flickering lights, clarity struck like lightning illuminating a night sky. The weight of my plans fell away, replaced by a desperate need to reclaim my identity. I had spent too long defining myself through the lens of his betrayal, and every expensive drink I indulged in was just a hollow distraction. As I stood there, I made a silent promise to myself: I would not go through with my plan. I wanted to tell Sarah everything, to confess how I had almost dragged her into my twisted scheme. But the words caught in my throat, unsure of how to bridge this chasm I had created between revenge and justice, between anger and healing. Instead, I forced a smile and looked Sarah in the eyes. "Let's get out of here," I said, suddenly desperate for fresh air, for the light of day to wash over the shadows of my intentions. "I just need a moment." As we stepped outside into the crisp night air, I exhaled deeply, a mix of relief and regret swirling within me. I finally understood that revenge may offer fleeting satisfaction, but it would never fill the void that Liam had created in my heart. I had to build my own happiness, one not reliant on tearing down others. But before that moment of clarity could wash over me completely, the bitter taste of revenge still lingered in the back of my mind. It was a taste I wasn't quite ready to give up, a shadow that haunted me. So I decided to outline my revenge plan in vivid detail. If I was going to pivot from revenge being my focus to reclaiming my own power, I needed to ensure that this plan would still play out, but not for my sake, rather, for my empowerment. The revenge plan, step by step 1. Establish communication with Sarah. I would confide in Sarah about my original intentions concerning Liam, explaining my emotional turmoil. This would not only strengthen our bond but also gain her perspective on the situation. It was crucial that she understood my motivations were rooted in heartbreak, not malice. 2. Create a casual encounter. I would arrange a casual hangout where I could accidentally run into Liam. I knew that he frequented a local coffee shop on weekends, so I planned a spontaneous brunch with Sarah there. I would make sure to look my best, something that would remind Liam of what he lost. 3. Plant the seed of interest. This part was the most delicate. I would enlist Sarah's help to subtly flirt with Liam. She was naturally charming, and her presence would be magnetic enough to draw him in. A playful touch on his arm, a bright smile, and laughter would go a long way. All the while, I would pretend to be invested in a conversation with another friend, conveniently allowing them to connect without my direct interference. 4. Craft a scenario of intimacy. I would orchestrate an opportunity for them to coincidentally end up at the same party later that week. I had a friend who was hosting an event and could easily add Sarah and Liam to the guest list. I'd casually mention to Liam that Sarah would be there, planting the idea in his mind. That way, he would subconsciously associate her with fun and excitement, something he had clearly been missing in our relationship. 5. Monitor their progress. I intended to keep tabs on their interactions without being obvious. I would subtly ask Sarah to share details of her conversations with Liam. I wanted to know how he responded to her and how quickly he fell for her charm. This was a web I was spinning, and every thread had to be woven carefully. 6. Intermediate friend involvement. I would plant seeds of doubt about Liam in Sarah's mind, framing him as the classic bad boy who toyed with hearts. I'd share my past experiences, emphasizing how he had treated me poorly. This would not only validate my feelings but also ensure Sarah had a guarded approach, just enough to keep her intrigued while also questioning his genuine intentions. 7. Revelation and confrontation. As their connection deepened, I would prepare a dramatic revelation of my own. I could reveal to Sarah the full extent of Liam's betrayal to both me and her, making it clear that he was not a man worth investing in. I would choose a moment when she seemed particularly smitten. Seeing the disappointment and hurt wash over her face would be both bittersweet and satisfying. 8. Final touches. At the climax of this plan, I envisioned a confrontation between Liam and me. Ideally, I would appear in a setting where the tension was palpable, the party where Sarah would be showcasing a flirtation with Liam, all while I was poised in the shadows. As the evening approached, I felt the electric buzz of anticipation coursing through my veins. My heart raced. I could taste the bittersweet satisfaction of what I was about to orchestrate. The air was thick with suspense, like the calm before a storm. The party was a kaleidoscope of laughter and colorful lights, friends gathered in clusters, and the hum of conversation swirling around me like a dance. I stepped inside, my nerves thrumming with adrenaline. I wasn't here to relive the past, but rather to reclaim my narrative. I caught sight of Sarah first, sparkling in a fitted dress that clung to her curves. The way she moved, her laugh ringing out like a chime, was intoxicating, irresistibly vibrant. I smiled as I watched her greet Liam, who was perched comfortably against the wall, surrounded by a group of friends. "Remember, just be yourself," I whispered to Sarah, my voice a mix of encouragement and bait. She nodded with a determined grin, and in that moment, I felt an almost predatory glee. As the night unfolded, the tension between Liam and Sarah crackled like static electricity. I watched from a distance, blending into the lively crowd, my heart pounding like a drum, every beat syncing with the unfolding drama. Liam was drawn to her, like a moth to a flame. Their chemistry was undeniable, that magnetic pull weaving an intricate tapestry of flirtation under the dim lights. When their eyes locked, I felt a pang of bittersweet triumph. I leaned against the bar, swirling my drink as I observed him lean closer to her, laughter spilling into the space between them. "You're really fun, you know that," he said, a charming smirk dancing on his lips. My pulse quickened. This was it. And then the moment arrived. Sarah laughed brightly, her hand brushing against his arm. "You're not so bad yourself, Liam. I've heard stories about you, though." I felt the adrenaline spike within me, a dark thrill coursing through my veins. I had planted the seeds of doubt, and now they were sprouting. I saw Liam's smirk falter for a moment, confusion flickering in his eyes. He shrugged it off, playful banter resuming as I inched closer, my heart pounding in my ears. "Is it true you broke a girl's heart not too long ago?" Sarah teased, her eyes glinting with mischief. My breath hitched. The atmosphere felt thick with tension as I watched him tense up, his facade momentarily slipping. Perhaps for the first time, he understood that his charming mask was slowly cracking. "Who said that?" Liam replied, attempting to deflect, but I could see the sweat gathering just above his brow, a telltale sign of the mounting pressure. "Just rumors," she replied, her voice light, but I could see the challenge in her gaze, the way she dared him to reveal more. I savored the moment, a simmering revenge cloaked beneath the guise of a casual conversation. Suddenly, I stepped into view, forcing a smile that felt dangerously practiced. "Hey, Liam!" My voice sliced through their moment. His eyes snapped to me, the color draining from his face as the realization of my presence set in. "YN," he stammered, glancing between Sarah and me, a look of panic flashing across his face. "Oh, don't mind me. Just thought I'd pop in and watch the show," I said, letting my words hang in the air with a mocking lilt. The subtle tension of the room morphed into something palpable, a charged atmosphere swirling with uncertainty. I enjoyed the way Liam's complexion shifted, how his carefree demeanor faltered in the face of looming confrontation. "YN, it's good to see you," he managed, attempting to regain his composure. But I could see his mind racing, calculating how to navigate this unexpected twist. The thrill of revenge spiraled within me, awakening a long-dormant strength. "We were just talking about you, actually," Sarah chimed in, her voice light but laced with an edge. "Liam was telling me how great a boyfriend he is." Or was? The playful smile on her lips belied the deeper undercurrent of mockery beneath. I could tell she was enjoying this as much as I was. "What brings you here?" Liam asked, his voice shaky, but I could sense the bravado, attempting to surface. I could see the gears turning in his mind. This was now a game of survival for his already tarnished reputation. "I wanted to see how you're doing," I replied, feigning concern as I moved closer, the space between us charged with unspoken history. "Heard you found someone special," I added, gesturing towards Sarah with a playful wink. "Lucky girl." The laughter around us felt like distant echoes, but my heart drummed loudly in my chest, reverberating with potential outcomes. I was both terrified and exhilarated. "Oh, we're just friends," Liam stammered, his eyes darting between us as he sought an escape. I relished the discomfort I saw flash across his face, the panic of someone cornered. "Friends who seem to be enjoying each other's company," I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You haven't changed, have you? Always charming, but never really loyal." Every word felt like a dagger, slicing through the layers of pretense he had carefully constructed. The room froze, laughter muffled as all eyes turned toward us, the atmosphere electrified with suspense. I could sense the collective breath holding, waiting for Liam's next move. "YN, this isn't," he began, but I cut him off. The satisfaction of seeing him squirm was intoxicating. "No, it's exactly what it is. It's time you face the truth, Liam. You walk around like you're untouchable, leaving a trail of broken hearts behind you, and you think you'll get away with it?" My tone was sharp, each word wrapped in the weight of my pain. "You don't know anything about me," he shot back, but the confidence in his voice wavered. I could see the cracks, the realization settling in that his charm was no longer working on me, that the grip he once had on our shared history was slipping. "I know enough," I replied, taking a step closer, letting the tension rise. "Sarah deserves better than an egocentric player who thinks love is merely a game." My gaze locked onto Sarah's, silently conveying my support, and I felt the rush of camaraderie in that moment. With that, the facade fell apart, and I reveled in the chaos I had orchestrated. I could see the shock in Liam's eyes as they flickered between disbelief and rage, but I didn't care. I had taken back control, and the weight of my own pain had transformed into something powerful. The party erupted into murmurs, the whispers swirling like a tempest around. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. The kind of day that makes the world feel washed out and gray, the kind that almost begs for a cup of something warm and a cozy blanket. But, instead of snuggling up with a good book or curling into the comforting embrace of my well-worn couch, I was standing in the middle of my kitchen, staring at the lifeless shell of what used to be my marriage. The scent of burnt coffee hung heavy in the air, a bitter reminder of my failed attempts to hold it all together. Outside, the rain drummed against the window, a steady rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. I could hear the echo of laughter from the two people who had shattered my world just days before, my best friend, Sarah, and my husband, Jake. Irony had never tasted so bitter. The two of them, the very cornerstones of my life, had turned into the wrecking ball that tore down everything I had built with love and trust. I stood at the kitchen sink, the light from the window casting a dull glow over the faded tiles, their once bright colors now dulled by time and neglect. I could still see the heart-shaped stickers that my daughter, Mia, had placed on the cabinet doors when she was little, remnants of a happier time. My fingers traced the edges of those stickers, and the memory of her giggles stung like salt in a fresh wound. The betrayal had been swift and merciless. One day, I was making plans for a family vacation, envisioning sun-soaked days on the beach, and the next, I was unraveling the truth. They thought I was oblivious, that I was too wrapped up in my own world to notice the stolen glances, the whispered phone calls, the sudden distance between us. But I wasn't blind. I had just chosen to ignore the cracks in our facade, hoping they would heal instead of widen. With every step I took through our home, silent echoes of happier moments haunted me. I could hear Mia's laughter bouncing off the walls in the hallway, her little feet pattering down the stairs, but all of that felt like a lifetime ago, as if I belonged to another world entirely. Now, all I could feel was the weight of their betrayal pressing down on me, and I was teetering on the edge of something dark and dangerous. I couldn't just let this go. I owed it to myself, and to Mia, to fight back. As the rain continued to pour, drowning the world outside, I felt something stirring within me, a quiet resolve, a flicker of vengeance that I had never known I possessed. What would the best theoretical ideas be in this circumstance? I didn't know yet, but I was determined to find out. And I would make them pay. Oh, how I would make them pay. The betrayal unfolded like a slow-motion train wreck, each revelation crashing into me with devastating clarity. It began innocently enough, or at least I'd convinced myself it was innocent. I remember those Friday nights when Jake would say he was heading out to meet the guys for drinks. I'd wave him off, slipping back into my routine of laundry and dinners, trusting him implicitly. After all, we had a solid marriage, or so I thought. My heart ached with the bittersweet memory of our wedding day, the smiles, the vows that felt like a promise sealed in gold. But as time wore on, the late nights became more frequent. There was a growing unease that fluttered in my stomach like a moth caught in a web. I'd catch him sneaking text on his phone, the light of the screen illuminating his face in the dark, the way he'd jump when I entered the room. "Just work stuff," he'd say dismissively. Yet, when I pressed him, searching for the truth, he'd wrap his arms around me, whisper sweet nothings that felt like a soothing balm but left bitter residue in my heart. And then there was Sarah. My closest confidant, a woman I'd shared every joy and sorrow with. I had always believed we could weather any storm together. But when I noticed the way she looked at Jake, the way her laughter lingered a bit too long in his presence, it felt like watching a slow burn, terrifying and mesmerizing at once. The whispers of suspicion grew louder, but the thought of them betraying me was simply too absurd to entertain. Each time I brushed aside the gnawing doubt, I felt a little more of my trust erode away, even as I was desperate to believe everything was fine. "You're imagining things," I'd tell myself. "You're being paranoid." The need for denial was like a lifeline, tethering me to the belief that my life wasn't crumbling around me. But deep down, I could feel the cracks spreading. I felt so naive, so blind, and the shame of my ignorance settled hard in my gut. How had I not seen it? How had I let it go this far? Then came the night I couldn't shake the feeling anymore. I remember standing at the sink, washing our daughter's favorite blue bowl, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. "You should know what's been happening behind your back." My breath hitched, and I dropped the bowl, shattering the fragile ceramic into a million pieces, much like my heart. My thoughts spiraled, racing through all the moments I'd questioned but ignored, all the signs I'd brushed off as mere paranoia. The message felt like a slap to the face. I was gripped with confusion and disbelief. I could hardly breathe as I read and reread the words, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. Was this a cruel prank? A mistake? Or was it true? My mind raced through 100 scenarios, each more painful than the last, until I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah. After a few rings, her cheerful voice answered, a sound that now struck me like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Hey, what's up?" she chirped, and I could hear the background noise of laughter. My world narrowed down to her voice, each syllable twisting the knife deeper. The betrayal felt like a dark cloud, suffocating me with its weight. "Are you and Jake?" I couldn't even finish the question, but the silence stretched between us, brittle as glass, and I could hear the laughter in the background still churning like a storm, taunting me. Sarah hesitated, and in that moment, everything I thought I knew about our friendship began to unravel. "What do you mean?" she finally asked, her voice too sweet, too innocent. "Don't play coy with me, Sarah. You know exactly what I'm talking about," I bit out, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and despair. I needed to wake up from this nightmare, to shake off the impending doom that clung to me like a second skin. But as I waited for her response, a sickening feeling settled in my stomach. She wasn't surprised by my question. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, but I could hear the tremor in her voice, fear or guilt, I wasn't sure which. And just like that, sparks ignited within me, emotions swirling chaotically. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and more alone than I had ever felt in my life. That night, I lay awake, the shadows of doubt wrapping around me. My phone buzzed again, another text from the anonymous number, "You deserve the truth. They won't stop until they destroy you." Each word was a dagger, digging deeper, twisting with cold certainty that my life was spiraling beyond my control. I wanted to scream, to unleash the tidal wave of hurt that crashed over me, but I felt paralyzed. Days turned into a blur of despair. I went through the motions of my daily life, but inside, I was a ticking time bomb. I'd walk through the grocery store, smiling through clenched teeth while my heart raced at every corner, convinced I'd run into either of them. The aisles felt suffocating, every mundane item, a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, felt like a reminder of the life I was losing. Conversations with friends became a balancing act. They would say, "How are you and Jake?" And I'd plaster on a smile, my throat tightening at the lie. "We're great," I murmured, even as I felt my trust fraying at the seams. Every time someone brought him up, my insides twisted, anger bubbling just beneath the surface. It felt like I was wearing a mask, a facade that grew heavier by the day. Then came the moment of public humiliation that I thought would shatter me completely. It was a Friday evening, and a group of our mutual friends planned a casual gathering. I could feel the tension building within me all week, but a part of me clung to hope, that maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe I was overreacting. I convinced myself that seeing them together would reveal the truth, and I could finally put the pieces together. When I walked into the dimly lit bar, my heart raced. The laughter and chatter buzzed around me, but I felt like I was in a different world, a spectator to my own life. And there they were, Jake and Sarah, perched intimately close on a bar stool. Their bodies leaned into one another, sharing secrets and giggles, the sight igniting a fire of betrayal deep within me. I wished I could freeze time, to go back to that moment when trust still wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I was rooted to the spot. I felt small, invisible, as if the walls were closing in around me. In that moment, the weight of isolation crashed down on me as I stood there, paralyzed by the sight of my life unraveling before me. The anger that bubbled beneath the surface erupted with the force of a volcano. It was like a switch had flipped inside me, igniting a fire that I had never realized had been brewing all along. I was no longer the passive woman who had let love slip through her fingers, nor was I the naive friend who had trusted so deeply. In that instant, I became someone new, a person forged in betrayal, scorn, and heartache. I remember the clinking sound of glasses, the laughter that felt like daggers in my back, and the sight of Jake leaning toward Sarah, his eyes twinkling with a brightness that had once been reserved for me. My heart pounded in my chest, not with the pain of love lost, but with the fierce realization that I was done being their punching bag, their fool. I had always been the one to offer forgiveness, to give second chances, but as I watched them enjoy their little performance, a primal scream clawed up my throat, begging for release. What had been the final straw, you ask? I'll tell you. It was witnessing the flicker of affection they shared, something I had yearned for but had been deprived of. It was the thought that they believed I was too weak to fight back, too broken to stand up for myself. The truth crashed over me like the torrential rain outside, and I realized, I was not weak, I was simply untested, and now I was ready to break free from the chains they had unknowingly forged around me. As I turned away from the bar, my mind raced, devising a plan that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The betrayal had released a fierce warrior within me. I wouldn't just let this go, I would rise from the ashes of this heartbreak and show them that there were consequences for their actions. I wanted them to feel the weight of their choices, to recognize the damage they had caused, not just to me, but to my daughter, to our family. The realization ignited a cold fire in my veins. I didn't need to confront them now, the moment wasn't about anger or confrontation. No, I needed to be smart. I needed to strategize. The best theoretical ideas began to swirl in my mind like a storm, subtle, calculated revenge that would dismantle them piece by piece. I envisioned their future crumbling beneath the weight of their own deceit. I could see it clearly. Jake, the man who'd once vowed to love me, would come to understand the true meaning of betrayal. And Sarah, my so-called friend, would be forced to reckon with her choices. I returned home that night, the world around me still humming with life, but I was no longer part of it. Instead, I felt like a ghost, an observer in my own existence. I sat on the edge of my bed, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of clarity amidst the chaos. The rain continued to fall outside, beating rhythmically against the window as if it knew the storm that was brewing inside me. As I stared at the pale ceiling, I envisioned what I would do. I would gather evidence, photos, texts, anything that would shatter their world as they had shattered mine. I would twist their own lies into weapons against them, forcing them to confront the reality of their betrayal. They thought they could have it all without consequences, but they were about to learn how wrong they were. Mia's innocent laugh echoed in my ears, bringing me back to the reality of my decisions. The plan took shape like a carefully constructed puzzle, each piece sliding into place with an ominous sense of satisfaction. It wasn't about rage, it was about precision, about crafting a masterpiece of revenge that would leave them breathless and regretful. I would turn their own tactics against them, a game of chess where I intended to be several moves ahead. Here's how I envisioned the steps unfolding. I needed proof, solid evidence that couldn't be denied. I had always been observant, but now I would take it to a level I'd never dared before. Using social media, particularly Instagram and Facebook, I'd keep an eye on their posts, comments, and interactions. I'd create a fake account to follow them discreetly, lurking in the shadows as I gathered intel. I'd document their late-night rendezvous, especially those that were conspicuously timed with his supposed business trips. I'd keep a log of their interactions, noting every instance of flirtation or intimacy. My heart raced at the thought, but it was invigorating, like being a detective in my own life story. Next, I would plant the seeds of doubt in Jake's mind. I'd stage innocent conversations with mutual friends, subtly dropping hints about how people were noticing the chemistry between Jake and Sarah. "Isn't it funny how close they've gotten lately?" I'd say, feigning casualness. I needed him to realize that the facade wasn't as airtight as he thought. I wanted to create a ripple effect of insecurity that would set the stage for the drama to come. In the meantime, I would flirt with a few acquaintances of mine, ones Jake recognized but didn't take seriously. I had a couple of friends who could play this part for me. I'd invite them over for casual gatherings, ensuring that Jake would see me laughing and having fun with someone else. I wanted him to feel the weight of my potential departure, to realize that I was no longer the docile partner he could take for granted. Once I had sufficient evidence, the time would come to lay it all bare. I envisioned creating a digital dossier of their betrayal, screenshots of texts, candid photos of them together, and even messages from that anonymous tipper who had first shattered my world. On a rainy evening, reminiscent of the day everything changed, I would invite both Jake and Sarah over, under the guise of sorting things out. I could see them sitting on opposite ends of the couch, tension in the air as I adopted a calm facade, like a predator waiting for the right moment to pounce. My heart would race as I revealed the evidence, a series of slideshows, each one more damning than the last. I'd watch their expressions morph from confusion to horror, their faces paling as reality crashed down upon them. But I wouldn't stop there. It wasn't enough for them to simply feel guilty, I wanted them to suffer the consequences of their actions. I planned to send copies of the evidence to our closest friends, making sure they understood the depth of the betrayal. Jake would lose not just me, but the respect of those he had lied to, and I wanted them to witness his downfall firsthand. I'd imagine the phone calls in the following days, the whispers, and the awkward encounters at social gatherings. I wanted my revenge to be a spectacle, a public unraveling of the day arrived. I felt the air crackle with electric tension, heavy, like the storm clouds that loomed over my home. I had invited them both under the guise of wanting to talk, to mend the wreckage, seeking clarity. As I prepared for their arrival, I felt a mix of anxiety and exhilaration, a predator ready to reveal its trap. When the doorbell rang, my heart thundered. I opened the door with a calmness I didn't quite feel, masking the storm raging inside me. Jake stood with that familiar charming smile, his eyes momentarily brightening before he caught my expression. Sarah stood beside him, her laughter faltering as she realized something was off. The tension between us was palpable, a fraying thread about to snap. "Hey, thanks for coming," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the fury bubbling below the surface. I ushered them inside, forcing a smile that felt more like a snarl. They settled on the couch, an awkward distance between them, a chasm they didn't yet understand. "Is everything okay?" Jake asked, concern clouding his features. His brow furrowed slightly, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind, trying to decipher the invitation's true intent. "Perfectly fine, actually," I replied, my lips curling into a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I've just been doing some thinking. About us." I motioned to the coffee table where I had neatly arranged a stack of printed screenshots and photos like trophies displaying their sins. Their eyes followed mine, and I could see the color drain from Jake's face, recognition dawning too late. "What's this?" Sarah asked, her voice sharp, laced with a hint of panic. "It's what you think it is," I said, my voice dripping with cold certainty. I picked up the first piece of evidence, a photo of them laughing together at a bar, the very moment I had become a ghost in my own life. "You see, I've been gathering some information. It turns out that while I was at home, you two were busy painting a very different picture." Jake swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" He shifted in his seat, and I could see him trying to find the right words, but they eluded him like a child caught stealing cookies from a jar. I slid the photo across the table toward him, watching as realization washed over his face. "That's the night you told me you were working late. Isn't that funny?" I leaned in slightly, my voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "You lied to me, right to my face." Sarah, realizing the game had changed, turned pale. "It's not what it looks like," she exclaimed, her bravado slipping. "Really?" I replied, tilting my head. "So it wasn't you two sharing a laugh, sharing a connection? Because I have more. Much more." With deliberate slowness, I unveiled the next piece of evidence, a text message exchange between them. The words felt like knives, sharp and unforgiving. "I can't wait to be with you," I read aloud, my voice steady as I met Jake's shocked gaze. "And this one, you make me feel alive again. Remember that." I wonder how it'd feel for Mia to read these words one day. With each revelation, I could see the disbelief morph into horror on their faces. Jake's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, each word he attempted to form crumbling to dust before it could escape. Sarah's the fallout was as spectacular as I had envisioned, but nothing could have prepared me for how the aftermath would unravel. The initial shock on their faces transformed into a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, desperation, and eventually, anger. But it was a different kind of anger. It felt like the kind of desperation that comes from being cornered, and I relished every moment of it. Jake sat there, mouth agape, trying to string together a defense that was destined for failure. "You don't understand," he stammered, his bravado crumbling. "It was a mistake." I leaned forward, my heart racing with adrenaline. "A mistake? Or a choice you made daily? You think I'm going to let you wiggle your way out of this?" My voice was calm, almost too calm, as I savored the power that coursed through me. Sarah, her face pale and defensive, attempted to interject. "You're overreacting. We didn't mean for it to happen." But I could see the cracks forming in her confidence, her eyes darting between Jake and me, searching for an escape that wasn't there. "Overreacting?" I echoed, disbelief twisting my features. "You invaded my life, my family, and you think I'm overreacting? You took everything I held dear and shredded it. You don't get to call the shots anymore." The moment hung heavy in the air, tension crackling like static. I watched as Jake's facade disintegrated, revealing a man who had made choices that now loomed over him like a dark cloud. After the confrontation, they stumbled back into their lives, but everything had changed. The seeds of doubt I had planted bloomed into full-blown distrust in their relationship. Mutual friends began to distance themselves, unsure of where their loyalties lay. The whispers of betrayal echoed in every corner of our community, a chorus that sang of their downfall. I felt a sense of satisfaction, but it evaporated quickly, replaced by the reality of what I'd wrought. The more I watched them suffer, the more hollow it felt. I had wanted justice, but what I received was the slow, painful realization that revenge was a double-edged sword. My triumph over them became an echoing void that left me feeling strangely empty. Jake moved out shortly after the confrontation, leaving behind a home filled with memories that now felt tainted. A part of me had hoped that this act of vengeance would lead to closure, a sense of reclamation of my life. But instead, I was left staring at the remnants of what had been, a crumbling marriage, a fractured friendship, and a daughter who deserved none of this chaos. Mia, sweet and innocent, bore the brunt of our decisions. I watched her play in the remnants of our once happy home, her laughter now tinged with confusion and uncertainty. The world she had known was crumbling beneath her, and I felt helpless as I tried to shield her from the storm of adult emotions swirling around us. The more I distanced myself from Jake and Sarah, the more I realized that I had created a rift that couldn't be easily repaired. Our friends whispered about the scandal over coffee, tensions ran high in social circles, and I became a topic of discussion rather than a participant in life as I had once known it. I had set fire to my own world in the pursuit of vengeance, and the flames were spreading faster than I could contain them. Jake tried to reach out, sending messages filled with apologies that felt like salt on a raw wound. "I'm sorry.
I never thought I'd be here, pouring my heart out in the quiet solitude of my dimly lit living room, the remnants of my past flickering on the screen in front of me. It's the soft glow from my laptop that seems to draw out all the shadows lurking in the corners of my mind. The smell of burnt coffee clings to the air, my attempt at comfort, but it only stirs the bitter taste of what once was. It's funny, isn't it? How a single person can invade your life so deeply that even years later, they still have the power to pull the strings of your memory like a marionette moved by unseen hands. Let me take you back to that summer light, warm and inviting yet holding an undertone of something darker. I was 23, with freshly dyed auburn hair that glinted like the sun as I ran my fingers through it absent-mindedly. I had just moved to this bustling city, its pulse quickening with every honk and shout on the busy street below, the perfect backdrop for a new beginning. But it was then that I met Eric, our paths colliding like two meteors in a night sky. He was charming, with an easy smile and a laugh that could light up the darkest corners of my heart. For a while, everything felt perfect, tantalizingly sweet like the first sip of a summer lemonade. I remember the first time he whispered that he loved me, his breath warm against my ear, and how it felt like we were the only two people in the universe. But as the months rolled by, that intoxicating sweetness began to sour. Eric was the kind of guy who enjoyed chaos, a master of stirring the pot. Friends became mere pawns in his game, and I soon found myself caught in a whirlwind of jealousy and manipulation. I'd see him charming others, while I stood on the sidelines, feeling smaller with every smile he flashed at someone new. And then, after 2 years of emotional whiplash, we finally ended it, an inevitable explosion of hurt and words thrown like knives. I thought I would finally escape the chaos, the incessant drama that seemed to cling to him like a shadow. Little did I know, the remnants of our relationship would haunt me well into the years that followed. Even now, as I sit here, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, stirring the pot, crafting new tales that twist the truth into something unrecognizable. I thought I had moved on, but the reality of it all weighs heavily on my chest. I can't escape the tension that ripples through my life whenever I hear his name whispered in familiar circles, or when I see a mutual friend's post online, something casual that feels like a knife twisting in an old wound. I never wanted revenge, it was never in my plans. But as I map out the last few years in my head, I'm starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, it's the only way to reclaim my narrative. I can't let him roam free in my mind, planting seeds of doubt and chaos. I need a plan, and I need it to be clever, calculated, something that will finally put an end to his manipulations. Because we all know the truth, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And I believe Eric is still that same master puppeteer, playing games, and I'm ready to cut the strings. The conflict didn't surface all at once, it was more like a slow unraveling, a gutting of everything I thought I understood about our relationship. In the early days, Eric's charm was intoxicating, but soon it became a veil, hiding the chaos beneath. The small betrayals emerged like cracks in a once beautiful vase. I remember the first time I felt it, an oyster of doubt nestled in my stomach. We were at a party, surrounded by friends, laughter swirling around us like autumn leaves. I caught Eric's gaze lingering too long on another woman, her laughter drawing him in like a moth to a flame. I brushed it off, foolish jealousy, I told myself, but then I couldn't shake the feeling. Was it paranoia, or was there something to it? My nights grew restless, each tick of the clock amplifying my insecurities. Slowly, I began piecing together the small lies. An innocuous text he'd forgotten to delete. A change in his energy, like he was a stage actor slipping out of character. The way he'd tell stories about our adventures, embellishing them to seem more thrilling, as if he needed validation from others rather than me. Yet, every time I confronted him, he'd wrap me up in his words, his beguiling smile disarming my anger. "You know I only have eyes for you," he'd say, and I'd want to believe it. After all, love is blind, something I had learned the hard way. But the whispers grew louder, and soon enough, I couldn't ignore them. Friends began to pull away, their gazes heavy with unspoken truths. "Is something going on with Eric?" one of them asked cautiously one night, her brow furrowed with concern. It felt like a punch to the stomach. I remained silent, a mask of laughter plastered over my confusion. Yet, the truth was festering. I could sense it, he was painting me as the villain in his retelling of our story. I was the one who was too needy, the crazy one, while he was simply the misunderstood artist. The more I dug, the more it hurt. Then came the day of the final betrayal, the one that shattered the glass of my world. I stumbled upon his social media, a late-night scroll through the screen, and there it was, a picture of him, arms wrapped around another woman, laughter spilling from their lips, eyes sparkling with that same mischievous light he once reserved for me. The caption read, "Finding new adventures." My heart sank. I thought I was building a life with him, but this was a dagger to the heart. I had been right all along, hadn't I? The masquerade was over, the truth stripped bare, and there I was, left to grapple with the wreckage. My hands trembled as I replayed the moment over and over, trying to convince myself it was a cruel joke. But deep down, I knew it was real. Eric had moved on, and I was still trapped in the cage of our shared memories. The anger bubbled up, igniting a fire inside me that I had never felt before. How could he? Why would he twist the knife like this? Each betrayal thrummed through my veins, a reminder of the weeks I spent questioning my worth. I felt like the fool, duped by the very person who had promised me the universe. And there it was, the bitterness I had tried to ignore creeping up my throat. I wanted to scream, to confront him, to make him feel the same suffocating pain he had thrust upon me. But I couldn't just lash out, I needed to be strategic. The weeks turned into months, and I found myself falling deeper into an abyss of distrust. Friends I once confided in began to fade away, their silence heavy with judgment and the unspoken knowledge of his betrayals. Every time I reached for reassurance, all I got was pity, their eyes darting nervously as if I were the one with the problem. I felt like a pariah in my own life, suffocated by the weight of the world's expectations. The isolation gnawed at me, an incessant reminder that the bonds I thought were solid were little more than threads ready to snap. I couldn't turn to my friends because I was terrified they'd take his side or, worse, confirm the whispers I feared were true. I became a ghost in my own life, wandering through social gatherings, cloaked in forced smiles while the laughter felt like a distant echo. But then the humiliation hit an all-time low. It was a chance encounter that solidified my worst fears. I was at a coffee shop, scrolling mindlessly through my phone when I heard that unmistakable laugh, his laugh, coming from behind me. My stomach knotted, and my pulse quickened as I turned to see him sitting there, grinning with that same charm, and holding hands with the woman from the photo. A punch of betrayal surged through my chest. I wanted to vanish, to dissolve into the floorboards, but instead, I froze. It was as if time had paused just for me to witness my own degradation. They were sharing a moment that mirrored ours, soft gazes, playful nudges, and I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, a wave of anger mixed with a feeling of utter worthlessness. As I awkwardly gathered my things, I could feel their eyes on me, could sense the judgment cascading silently between them. I spilled my drink everywhere, the cold brew soaking the floor and my shoes, an accident, but in that moment, it felt like a symbol of my life upended. I mumbled an apology, my cheeks flushed with both embarrassment and fury, and rushed out before I could hear their laughter echoing in my mind. That day was the tipping point. I became paranoid and suspicious, watching as the remnants of our shared circle of friends began to dwindle to mere acquaintances. I heard snippets of conversations that felt like they were directed at me, whispers about my crazy ex and how I should just let it go. The words stung, a reminder that Eric was still casting his spell, warping the narrative to fit his needs. It felt like a cruel cosmic joke. I had once built a life and shared a vision of the future with this person, but now I was an outcast in my own story. The shame of being portrayed as the villain made it impossible to trust anyone. Even the people I once considered allies began to retreat, their glances heavy with pity or judgment, and I couldn't help but think they were taking Eric's side without even knowing the full story. I began to lose myself, feeling like a ghost in my own skin, haunted by echoes of laughter that felt long gone. Friends who once texted just to check in started fading out, leaving me stranded like driftwood in a sea of betrayal. The isolation crept deeper, wrapping around me like an anchor, dragging me down into a darkness I couldn't escape. But one night, while scrolling through old photos in a fit of nostalgia, I stumbled upon a video of Eric and me at a concert, the way his arm was wrapped around me, my laughter ringing out like a melody. We looked so happy, so in love. But as I watched, something shifted deep within me. That moment was long gone, and the person in that video felt like a stranger now. I could no longer ignore the gnawing need for closure, for an end to the chaos he had brought into my life. And then it hit me, the night of the coffee shop encounter had been the catalyst, but this was the ignition point, the moment of clarity. I didn't want to be haunted by memories any longer. I wanted to reclaim my narrative, to take back what he had stolen from me, my confidence, my peace, my story. I was tired of being seen as the villain in a story I didn't choose to write. In that moment, I made my decision. I wouldn't just fade into the background, I would rise from the ashes of this betrayal and write my own ending. I envisioned a plan, a strategy that wouldn't just brush him aside but would make him realize the repercussions of his actions. This wouldn't be some petty revenge, it would be a lesson, a powerful reminder that those who play with hearts can't do so without consequences. I started mapping out my plan carefully, with the precision of a chess player. The tools were all around me, my knowledge of his habits, the friends still loyal to me, those who had witnessed his manipulation firsthand. I remembered their faces in moments of doubt, their concern etched deeply in their expressions. They felt it too, I wasn't alone in this. I reached out to a couple of friends, the ones I trusted most, and began sowing the seeds of my revenge. They were slow to catch on to my intentions, but as I laid out the pieces, they saw the vision I had for my future and the urgency behind it. I wasn't lashing out in anger, I was reclaiming my power, forcing him to confront the chaos he had orchestrated, the narratives he had spun that painted me in a light I didn't deserve. I gathered evidence, screenshots of texts, photos, and memories that showcased a different story. Eric had painted me as the irrational one, but I would turn the tide and show everyone the real master, manipulator. I began crafting a narrative of my own, one that would highlight his deceit and paint the truth across our shared circle. Every day, the old emotions felt less like chains and more like fuel. The anxiety I had felt before evolved into determination, and for the first time in years, I found myself smiling, a genuine smile, one that came from a place of empowerment, not victimhood. I refused to be the fool any longer. The turning point had ignited something within me, an ember that burned fiercely against the shadows of my past. As the pieces began to fall into place, I felt the weight of my plan settle comfortably on my shoulders. This was not about just revenge, it was about transformation. It was about shedding the layers of hurt and anger and rising anew, a phoenix born from the ashes of betrayal. I would confront him, not with chaos or anger, but with the calm assurance of someone who had finally reclaimed their narrative. And as I plotted my revenge, I couldn't help but feel exhilarated. Eric wouldn't see it coming. He was still lost in his web of lies, blissfully unaware that the very thing he had tried to destroy was rising again, stronger and more determined than ever. This was only the beginning. As I sat on my couch, the shadows from the flickering screen casting distortions across the walls, I felt a surge of clarity. Revenge wasn't about chaos, it was about precision and strategy. I had been a pawn in Eric's game for far too long, and now it was time to flip the board. I meticulously crafted a plan that felt both liberating and intoxicating. Here it is, step by step. Step 1, gather evidence, the hunt for truth. I started a meticulous collection of evidence that highlighted Eric's manipulation. This included screenshots of texts exchanged between him and mutual friends, along with any incriminating posts he had made on social media that hinted at his less than honorable behavior. I also reached out to friends I had confidence in, those who'd seen his true colors and were willing to confirm my side of the story. The scavenger network. I created a secret group chat with my inner circle, ensuring we could communicate without the risk of Eric catching wind of our discussions. Each friend would be tasked with gathering intel about Eric's recent escapades, something to paint a clearer picture of his continued chaos. It was like building a small army, fortifying my side with the truth. Step 2, the social media trap. Revamping my profile. I took a deep breath and revamped my social media profiles. I made them vibrant and filled with joy, showcasing my newfound happiness and independence. This wasn't just about showing Eric what he lost, it was also a way to lure him into a false sense of security. I knew he'd be keeping tabs on me, and I wanted him to think I was moving on effortlessly, planting subtle seeds. As my posts gained traction, I began to subtly plant information about my new pursuits, hobbies, travels, and accomplishments, things that would catch his eye and stir jealousy. I made sure my friends engaged with these posts, commenting about how I was thriving without him. It was all part of the ruse. Step 3, the confrontation setup. The event. I decided to host a small gathering, nothing too extravagant, just a few close friends who could help me orchestrate this encounter. I sent out invites to include some of Eric's friends, knowing that he would want to come. I needed him to walk into a carefully laid trap, where the truth would unravel like a tapestry before his eyes. The accidental meeting. I strategically planned for my closest ally to invite Eric specifically. Their connection would serve as the catalyst for him to attend. I wanted him to feel comfortable, akin to the days when we'd all hang out freely, blissfully unaware of the brewing storm. Step 4, the reveal. The night of reckoning. On the night of the gathering, I ensured the atmosphere was light and fun. The laughter around me would be the perfect cover for the tension building beneath the surface. I enlisted friends to casually drop hints about past events, things Eric had twisted, comments he'd made about me, moments I'd felt betrayed, the evidence revelation. As the evening wore on and drinks flowed, I subtly slipped into conversation the evidence I had gathered. I could see Eric's demeanor shift as my friends began to piece together the narrative he had crafted, revealing the truth behind the facade he had maintained. Step 5, the final blow. Confronting him. At the height of the night, I planned to confront Eric directly. I would take a deep breath, channeling every ounce of confidence I had cultivated over the past months. The air was thick with laughter and conversation, yet I felt oddly detached, as if I were floating above the chaos, surveying the territory. The instant he walked through the door, I felt a jolt of adrenaline rush through me. Eric, always so effortlessly magnetic, greeted everyone with that same charming smile that used to make my heart race. He was oblivious to the storm brewing under the surface. As he made his way through the crowd, greeting old friends, I could see the hint of confusion etched into his expression as he noticed the awkward glances exchanged among our mutual friends. I let the moment linger, watching as he sunk deeper into the trap we had set, all the while maintaining my smile. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and I could feel my heart pounding to the rhythm of the impending confrontation. Finally, when the noise reached a peak, I stepped forward. "Hey, everyone," I called out, my voice cutting through the laughter like a knife through silence. "Can I have your attention for just a moment? I have something important to discuss." The room quieted, all eyes landing on me. I could see Eric's brow furrow slightly. He sensed something was off. I took a deep breath, locking eyes with him, my heart pounding in anticipation. "Eric," I said, my tone deceptively light, "it's so nice to see you again. It's been too long." The words dripped with sweetness, masking the underlying tension like a thin layer of icing over a bitter cake. He smiled, but there was hesitation behind it, a flicker of uncertainty that sent a shiver of satisfaction through me. "Yeah, it really has. Things have changed a lot." "Changed?" I echoed, drawing the attention of our friends closer. "You mean like how you've been busy spreading lies about me? Or is it the fact that you've been busy moving on with someone else while I was still picking up the pieces of my heart after you shattered it?" Gasps rippled through the crowd, and I could see Eric's face turn pale, his smile faltering as the weight of my words hung in the air. "Are you really going to do this here?" he asked, his voice low, almost pleading, as he tried to regain control of the situation. But the moment had passed, and I could see the cracks forming in his carefully constructed facade. "Yes, I am," I replied, my voice steady, gaining strength with every word. "Because I'm done being the villain in your story. I'm here to share a different perspective, one that highlights the chaos you've inflicted on me and others." I gestured toward our friends, their faces filled with a mixture of sympathy and shock. "Did you really think you could keep spinning your narrative without anyone questioning the truth?" I continued, my pulse racing. "Did you think I wouldn't fight back?" And then, I pulled out my phone, the screen illuminating with the evidence I had gathered. "Here's a collection of your messages. Texts to friends where you belittled me, where you turned me into the crazy ex that everyone whispers about." I held the phone up, letting the group see the screen. "Remember when you told Maria that I was too clingy? Or how you had the audacity to say you were just trying to help me when all you did was dismantle my self-worth?" I locked eyes with Eric, refusing to look away. "I was not the problem. You were the after the truth spilled out like the wine that had once been our shared laughter." The room fell into an eerie silence, thick with tension. I could feel the collective breath of my friends, the weight of their gazes pressing down on Eric. Every word I had painstakingly crafted hung in the air, echoing like a drumbeat in my chest. This was it, the reckoning, the moment I had longed for, but never truly believed would come. Eric's reaction was immediate, his face shifted from shock to anger in a heartbeat. "You're making a huge mistake," he hissed, his voice low, yet laced with desperation. I could see the mask of charm slipping, revealing the chaotic energy I'd grown so familiar with, the master manipulator caught off guard, unable to weave a new narrative in this moment. But I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I felt liberated, empowered. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my story, my life. As I stood there, my heart racing, a sense of purpose washed over me, drowning out the fear that had once held me captive. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Eric," I declared, my voice steady. "You've been spinning your tale for too long, and I refuse to be the scapegoat for your insecurities. I deserve to be seen, truly seen, by my friends, by those who matter." The crowd shifted, murmurs of disbelief and sympathy rippling through the group. I could feel the support surrounding me, bolstering my confidence, and Eric shrank under the weight of my words. The truth was a powerful force, and I had finally harnessed it. I continued, "Let me remind you of how many hearts you've toyed with, how many lives you've manipulated, all while playing the innocent boy next door. Friends here have seen it, felt it, just as I have. You think you're untouchable, but tonight, you're the one exposed." With each revelation, I watched as my friends exchanged glances, recognition dawning in their eyes. They began to piece together the puzzle Eric had long distorted, suddenly understanding the narrative from my perspective rather than the caricature he had painted. The laughter from before had turned into an uncomfortable tension, and I could see the cracks in Eric's facade deepen. One of my friends, Mia, stepped forward, her voice steady. "I've seen it too, Eric. The way you twist stories, how you manipulate people. It's not okay." Her words were like a ripple effect, giving others permission to speak out, to embrace their truths. Eric's face flushed, his charisma fading into something unrecognizable. "You're all just," he started, but the words faltered, his voice trembling as the realization set in. He was losing control. The crowd wasn't there to support him anymore, they were rallying around me, the one he had tried to vilify. I felt a rush of gratitude and solidarity, each supportive voice pulling me back from the brink of my past insecurities. "I thought I was the one who needed to apologize," I said, letting my gaze linger on Eric, "but it seems the table has turned. I'm here to take back my voice, my power, and my story." The air was electric, charged with the simultaneous release of tension and the dawning clarity of my friend's realizations. I had transformed from a shadow of my former self into a beacon of truth, shining brightly in the dark shadows Eric had tried so hard to cast over me. In that moment, something shifted. I could see the fear in